Howdy everyone, it's me once again, the one and only Killer Dan. And today I'm going to be talking about something Disney related, of course. And I figured I would do another video of this. It's something that's been popping up over and over and over again. And even though in some ways I'm getting tired of bringing it up, if I'm going to be bloody honest here. But even though I have nothing against it really, but just saying. But for the third installment, at least a possible third installment for Frozen, and the chance of Elsa getting a girlfriend. I mean, was this really necessary? But a lot of fans seem to be constantly bringing it up. So a lot of fans want to bring up the fact that there's a possibility. It could be a thing, I guess. Because in Frozen 2, these two characters to keep, putting together in fan art, fan fiction, or what have you, having these stories where these two actually become official couple. But of course, it's not canon considering the fact that it's fan art and it's fan fiction. But that aside, when it comes to third installments, they're usually really bad, and it usually goes downhill. Like for example, Terminator 3, which is awful. So I mean, granted, Terminator 2 is often considered to be one of the greatest sequels of all time, so it's going to be a hard act to follow. And yes, so is this one the third Matrix film. And yes, of course, to be fair here, the second Matrix movie wasn't all that good to begin with. It just went downhill from there, I guess you can say. But then there was also the other movie of Spider-Man 3. I mean, okay, it's not the absolute worst film ever made, sure, but it's still not very good. So there's that, folks. So there's also the movie of Alien 3. And yes, I know those director's cut out there. There's two versions of this. And the first Aliens film was really good. I was followed with a great sequel, but then they just went downhill from there. But okay, let me see another example. I can think of right off the bat is Blade 3 or Blade Trinity, which was awful. It just came out like no one cared anymore. It then felt shoehorned in there. So because of this, there's a possible chance of them rebooting the series, which is stupid. And there's Superman 3 as well. Yeah, there's my point there, folks. Is that around the third part, usually just starts to go really downhill, of course. As the number of films in the series grow, there's the possibility that the latest entry will be, of course, terrible increases dramatically, of course. Why the fourth sequel of a film? It's something of a coin toss. Because sometimes it might be great, sometimes it might be mediocre, or sometimes it might be bad, or sometimes not even better. So the second installment of a franchise is a bit of a coin toss, like I said. But if the second installment is often great, they would usually try to make a third, a fourth, a fifth, a sixth, seven, eight, nine, 10, 11, 12, or even 13 movies in total. So at a certain point, you have to think about the fact that there's a possibility of this just becoming nothing more than a cash cow, and they're just trying to milk it. And yeah, of course, movies that go to theaters have the high production values, of course, but on the whole, their directors are at least trying sometimes. But there's a direct-to-video market, of course. The chances that the third one is nothing more than just utter garbage, of course. And Disney is known for making lousy direct-to-video sequels. And Disney, the studio, had produced some of the worst sequels I've ever witnessed. This entire video could have easily just been about these god awful sequels they produced over the years. So yeah, there's of course gonna be a great decline because of this. So yeah, they just gonna assume that the movie itself, just because of its popularity, they're gonna think that people will just gonna watch it. So it's usually something that's not good enough to get a theatrical release, and as a general rule, I guess they tend to be right. In other words, I guess what I'm saying is that sequels to movies generally, not always, but generally are just there just to create revenue for the company and nothing else. It's rarely that it's any good or as good as first, if not better. That seems to be a really, really rare case. There's some exceptions to this rule here, folks, because such movies like The Godfather 2, which is often considered to be one of the greatest sequels of all time, even in comic books, there was The Dark Knight, there was that. And of course, even in the sci-fi genre, The Empire Strikes Back as well. So those, some good sequels out there. Yeah, like this one too. Sure, I'll admit that there are some great sequels, and it's usually the second part. Usually, that managed to be really good. And I'd say the same thing with Frozen 2. It actually manages to be more enjoyable than the first. But despite that, having really good sequels are too few and too in between. For every one good sequel, so like 50 bad sequels that followed. And it's usually the third installment. Because, case in point, there's the X-Men The Last Stand, which is, for the most part, really hated on. And then there's also the other movie, The Karate Kid 3, which is really, yeah, it's something, right? Yeah. So this kind of stuff does happen, unfortunately. And it sometimes just happens just because they want to milk the franchise or whatnot. So if there's a third part, and it's usually make a sharp downhill turn from there, even if the second film turns out to be actually pretty solid. So yeah, folks, I can definitely say that this is like a something I did notice that they from the film industry, not just Disney, of course. Disney's known for making bad sequels, sure, but anyway, more usually than not, it's usually because of the fact that making a sequel just because the original film was successful, and that's it. So of course, the people behind these movies, the executives, just want more money, regardless how creative potential that the movie may have, or if the films really want a sequel or not. The sequel being unplanned seems to be the most common thing. Many films out there are written to have a sense of closure, the creators just wanting no follow-ups in mind. I mean, yes, there's some exceptions, but not always. Most of the time, it's just meant to be a one-time thing. This happens less nowadays, sure, especially considering the fact that everyone in Hollywood is basically wants to do an expanded universe. Yeah, it just seems like everybody nowadays just wants to do an expanded universe. Star Wars has an expanded universe, of course. And then let's go into the whole idea that even Marvel has an expanded universe. And then obviously the DC is going to want to build their own expanded universe. And then top of that, I know these known films attempted to have an expanded universe. I mean, are you kidding me? Seriously? Yeah, even with the Fast and Furious, there's a bunch of movies of those, and they're planning to make even more. And let's not forget about Shrek. Shrek had made quite a bit of sequels as well, along with other franchises like Harry Potter as well. There's a bunch of those. And I know the character of James Bond, have been doing this kind of thing for quite some time already. And yes, obviously, even in anime, look at Pokemon. Pokemon has a truckload of movies as well. So yeah, that's something to think about. Point being is like it just comes off like everybody wants to do an expanded universe one time or another. What most of the time is not planned. They don't plan to do an expanded universe, with a few exceptions, of course. I mean, there's some franchises that were planned from the start, but that doesn't go for every single one of them because a good chunk of the time, films are meant to be a single installment with a sense of closure. With, like I was saying earlier, with the creators not wanting to make any follow-ups in mind when they were made. This kind of a thing happens, of course. So, yeah, this does happen because they're just trying to, have some sort of cash thrown in, and of course, have some sort of contrived revival of some character to return, and he's usually a villain who is probably killed off or kicked out in the first film in some sort of manner. they attempt to turn a standalone film into maybe like a two-parter or a trilogy, with the first film being a single movie with a certain type of ending, which of course can be problematic. So some people, okay, with that in mind, some people might have want the story, the one single story, maybe split into two movies, of course. But if that happens, it might be a bunch of other sequels that might follow up with a little plot be stretched between them or something. So, after a series of good or bad sequels, the creators want to finish the franchise off in the best possible way. Or just sick of delivering bad sequels, which is often the case. So they may make a tend to end the series in some sort of way. They promise this one film may be the last entry and be the last one of the entire franchise. And maybe as advertised as the final chapter. But then that promise is eventually broken with yet another sequel. So my point being is that should there really be a Frozen 3? I don't know about that. So I guess to go more into what I was saying earlier with Elsa having a girlfriend, with her sexuality, her sexual orientation, and there's been a huge hashtag online that's been pushing give Elsa a girlfriend in a potential sequel, a third installment. This could sound like a good idea in some ways, and I know a lot of people, a lot of fans of the first two films had interpreted it as Elsa as a lesbian character. However, this hasn't really been planned out in the Frozen 2. Yeah, in the sequel, Frozen 2 didn't really give Elsa a love interest like at all. Rather, instead, just goes on the focus to on a journey for self-discovery, which in itself doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing, of course. But should she really have a girlfriend in a possible third movie? I don't know. It seems a little late, don't you think? And I mean, some people may say no because you could always use this as a method of expanding the character in some sort of fashion. But you just come to question that. Would you think that's just a bad setup in some ways? Because you already two films in, and in the third film, you now want to bring up this kind of a thing. I don't know. This could be a good. This could be a good thing if done properly, I guess. But whatever, I guess. So a lot of fans want this thing to keep happening with a romantic interest. While a third film isn't exactly in the works just yet, I mean, a lot of people, a lot of fans have spoken about it, but there is no word of having a third installment of the movie. So a lot of people believe that this will be a perfect opportunity for the Disney studios to break the mold and make a step forward in terms of diversity and whatnot by having Elsa be introduced as a gay queen, what have you. But could this work? Maybe. So there's a possibility, I guess. Being monarchy, yeah, it could do something in regards of that. It could be good potential that's being run by two women or what have you. So I don't know how you could add this to the story, considering how the movies ended, I guess. But I guess there could be something in regards of that. I guess I don't know. There's also this whole thing that when those Disney fans are trying to come up with some sort of theory that all these characters are actually related, which means Rapunzel is a part of their family, I guess. And also considering the fact that these two are supposed to be related, like grandparents or something like in that nature. And also speaking of Tarzan, these characters right here are supposed to be related as well. So I guess that's something you would have to discuss in the third movie. I guess some potential storylines, I guess. Even though it's a big confusing mess when you actually think about it. So I don't know what they would do with that kind of a thing, I guess. But yeah, that's a bit of a head scratcher right there, of course. But yeah, Frozen 3 is said that it could be a perfect chance to have a gay queen. I don't know how you make that be a story, I guess. her journey have been already about self-discovery and about breaking boundaries, of course. And there's the whole bit of the enchanted forest, of course. And Elsa herself has always been different anyway. And even though the fact that the films themselves never really hinted at any romance, really, mind you, a lot of people, fans anyway, got this whole gay romance from these two characters. Even though, despite the fact that two characters here really did not have any kind of chemistry. I mean, for crying out loud, they barely shared any screen time together, like hardly at all. So I don't know how they could actually jump to that conclusion, other than the fact that both are women, I guess. But even that's pretty vague. So I don't know about that, folks. That seems like a does seem like a quite questionable. So, yeah, I mean, granted, a lot of people would want to bring up the fact the that the world itself does need more LGBT icons, and having the studio as famous as Disney could use this brand as a way to exploit this kind of potential storylines, themes, and whatnot to be in their films. Since a lot of the LGBT community had watched a lot of the films to begin with. So a lot of people felt that this could be a perfect opportunity to actually do so. So yeah, I'm on the fence about this. If I'm gonna be honest here, folks, I'm really fence out about this, but because it was never hinted at this anyway. But a lot of people would just say that this could be a perfect opportunity to educate children about the fact that there's different people around the world and teach them at an early age that to be accepted. Because not kids themselves are never born homophobic. They are taught it. A lot of people would believe in, and you'd be right about that. So there's that going on, of course. So, of course, a lot of people would say that diversity itself needs to have be represented in stories and whatnot. Well, I'm not exactly against that, of course, really. But what I'm wondering here, how you can make that work exactly? I don't know. I don't know how you make that work really. But I mean, some people might want to just argue that there's more important things to focus upon than having a character have a relationship. And well, to some degree, that may be. Well, in some ways that may be true, but at the same time, that doesn't necessarily mean you don't need to knock that idea down. This could be a good way to explore certain ideas and themes in a story. But what would that amount to? That's the You can't just have it in there for its own sake. So that's kind of like a big question as well. What would this amount to? What would be the purpose? Why would it exist within the context of the story? What's the purpose? Why is it here? So yeah, you can't just have it in there just because. So yeah, that's in terms of narrative, you do have to think about this kind of a thing. You have to talk about what's going to be the plot about. What's the actual story, really? For the first film, even if you might want to argue a movie, the first installment of a franchise may have planned a sequel, and it was maybe it could be self-contained and could be enjoyed on its own. But then for the second or third film, however, the producers could have plans for even more sequels and more spin-offs and have the sequel or sequels with hooks, or I should say sequel hooks, with I mean, the unfinished plot threads in order to set up the up and coming movies, I suppose. I guess just making one current good one, I guess. This could even get, even crazier, I guess, with even more of them coming out. The original film could be theatrically rich in some ways, but then have the sequels were either maybe too crazy with its topics that could require really more wild stories and whatnot. So, and yeah, and what are you gonna do? What exactly is gonna happen here, really? So, if anything, what's going to be the story? What's going to be the plot? What's going on exactly? What's going to be the whole purpose of any of this. So, yeah, I don't know, folks. I know when it comes to sequels, they want to make the second and third part be more grander than the first. Yeah, you could always focus on one of the other family members for the third movie, maybe, and have Elsa and Anna be connected to that in some sort of fashion. I don't know, maybe. And yeah, that's the thing, folks. I want to bring up when it comes to money. Usually, the sequel may have a much lower budget compared to the first, and while money itself isn't enough to make a movie good, but there are many inferior sequels that have many bigger budgets than the original. And a bigger budget doesn't always mean that it's gonna be better. But at least with more money, it could mean that the people behind the films could have some faith in the film being a big deal. I mean, granted, if Disney's gonna make a Frozen 3, of course they're gonna want to release it in theaters and not have it be a direct-to-video sequel. And of course, it's gonna have a lot of money because the first two Frozen films have a fairly big budget, and both films have made a truck ton of money. So chances are, if they did make a third film, it's gonna have a big budget and it's gonna be released in theaters. And of course, it's gonna advertise this like crazy. So there's a fairly good chance it could make that money back. So yeah, there was that. There'd be some sort of faith in this kind of a thing, I guess you can say. So yeah, maybe it could work. I mean, I don't know how they would do it really because I don't know what the like I was saying. I don't know what would the plot be really. I mean, they might have a character in mind, or in this case, characters in mind, but it still doesn't explain certain things. What will Anna do? What about Kristoff? What about his reindeer? Or what about any other characters that's from the expanded family? So there's that. And if I remember correctly, didn't the character of Hans, didn't he say he had like 8 brothers or something? So could the third movie focus on that? I mean, you could use that as a way to make a villain, I guess. So what would be going on there? Revenge, I guess. And maybe they want to see kind of like revenge kind of plot going on and go after Elsa and Anna, and the romantic relationship could be threatened because of this. I don't know. It's leaving out way too many possibilities to actually have something going on with that. So I don't know, folks, if they were do this kind of thing. So I don't know what we would be focusing on really. I'm just taking a good guess here. Is all I'm saying. So, and of course, they're gonna be bring up the cast from the first two films. The actors and actresses who did the voices for these characters will of course may want to return. So, but the thing is that what if they don't want to come back? The recasting of the returning characters with a lower budget may harm the movie, of course, obviously. But there's also, of course, there's going to be the mysterious, unexplained departure of a major or somewhat main supporting characters from the first two films, usually because the actors or actresses didn't want to return and the filmmakers couldn't really uh, explain that, really. And of course, there's usually the casual and meaningless and shameless and sometimes just killing off beloved characters for no reason, of course. So what about that? And yeah, this thing just comes off too, too many questions, of course, to come up, obviously. So yeah, I know it comes off in dangerous territory as well. Because I mean, speaking of relatives, the sequel part three could revolve around often previously unmentioned relative or friend of a beloved character, um, who could return or would return and to explain around the idea that they were there all along, even though they were never there in the first two films. So, yeah, that's going to be something to be discussed. How can you work around certain characters? You're going to leave them prison that they were here all along, and not just shoehorned in there. So, yeah, it's not going to. I don't know. Again, I don't know how this would work really at all. I really don't know. So, what can they go from this point? Having the third film be softer or more lighter than the first two films can be a breaking point. Could be to the point where it could be labeled as a really soft, super goody goody, kid friendly stuff. Or you might go to the other extreme and just make it darker and edgy just for the sake of it, which of course can be really stupid. I mean, the Frozen 2 was pretty dark on its own when you think about it. In some ways, yes, the sequel was a bit darker than the first film, and it did it for a reason. It did come off gloomier, but again, it was within context of how they will want to have the story set up. So, what would they do with the third film in that regard? Think about the tone of it, of course. Obviously, think about how they're gonna succeed in that. So another problem that might come from this is that it may be too similar to the previous two films. To the point, it's just the same thing all over again. The creators may not realize it at first, but you do have to come up with some sort of idea to make it seem refreshing, even if the audiences may want to see the story continue, but at the same time not have it be repeat exactly the same thing, of course. And obviously, make sure that the story character arcs are not repeated all over again. So this in itself can, yes, be rather problematic. So yeah, I don't know how they would work. I mean, I know I'm saying a lot of I don't knows, really, of course, but yeah, this can be a problematic, of course. So it just comes off. You don't want to make it come off like it keeps repeating itself over and over and over again. This may seem like a gimmick, of course, in a lot of ways. So yeah, I don't want this kind of a thing to be doing it again and keep repeating the same thing over and over again. Go up to the point where it just gives nauseous. You don't want the exact same thing to be repeated from the previous two movies, like as if they just recycled the script. So yeah, you just don't want this to keep repeating. It just happens in a slightly different spot, of course, or whatever. This recycling the same story over and over again of course, happened in movies before. When two or more, even TV programs, when two or more TV shows show the same kind of same writers, or when a freelance scriptwriter is in this kind of business, you do have to think about the possible chance of things being repeated. Yeah, you could always argue that maybe Disney would just hire, you know, skilled artists, skilled scriptwriters to skillfully craft a well-told story, which yes can be possible, and to make the story itself seem more special, of course, and more original. And that's the thing. However, haste and carelessness can and has resulted a show or a movie franchise that can just feel like have this cookie cutter feel towards it, and yes, can actually push people away from it because it's going to come up way too similar. The recycled scripts kind of do have uh, a common thing when it comes to that, of course. Recycling way too many storylines, of course, unfortunately. So when a show or a movie series has been going on for a very long time, they might find themselves unintentionally recycling their own scripts because it's really difficult to come up with some brand new ideas for each movie. This is often result in changing the writing staff where new writers can't possibly expected the plot lines of so many storylines that was previously done. So yeah, it happens. So yeah, especially if a movie or TV show can be targeted towards a fleeting demographic or one that's suffering from a film franchise for going on for too long. And that's another thing. How much is too much? How long is too long? So yeah, you don't want to make it up to the point where it just becomes, and before you know it, yeah, that. Oh boy. So yeah, folks, you just want to keep going and going and going and going and going and going and going for years and years and years. So maybe fans of a certain series of films may want this, but you don't want to go up to the point where you're just gonna keep going just for its own sake, just because. So yeah, this might become like how you gonna do that anyway? How you gonna create a third film and possibly even more afterwards without making it seem like a sort of strict formula, I guess? And you're just trying to see you could make a story where you're trying to bring in new incomers. And that's another thing. If you do a third film, how you gonna bring in new incomers and not just appeal to the fans themselves? So that's another thing you do have to basically discuss. And yeah, it can be rather difficult, of course. But I guess if they do have other set of writers, let's make sure the plot twist or character twist or whatever you call it um, doesn't get put off badly, really. I know each writer might want to have their own bag of writing tricks before everything just officially finishes. So the writer is not only going to just spoil it or just to appeal the fans, and do you want to bring other people as well? So you don't just pander to the audience, folks. That's another thing. Don't pander just for the sake of pandering, and that's the thing. So again, of course, it's more easier said than done. Of course. So of course, when you think about it, you don't want to come off like where a certain arc or some plot thread would be continuously being repeated. And you do want to make things rather interesting, of course, which, yes, of course, does. It's going to be more difficult than, said. It's easier said than done, trying to keep it refreshing. You don't want to make come off like, oh, same story, different names. That kind of a thing. You don't want this kind of a thing to be just um, keep proceeding the same kind of way. Like they made big hits with the first two Frozen films, and then you could proceed to write the same kind of story with the same kind of thing that made them famous. So yeah, unfortunately, you don't want that kind of a thing to keep happening over and over and over again. But yeah, let's. So you don't want to make it seem like they're just going to copy the second movie. A lot of people felt the second film is much better. You just don't want to come off like they're just going to recycle the same story from the second movie. Or they have to go on a grand adventure to some forest and something happens there. You don't want things to happen all over again. Yes, I realize there's a high demand for creative ideas that seem fresh. But the thing is that if brand new work, a brand new story has far too many similarities to the old stories or popular story that is, and yeah, you don't make it too similar. So, but again, you might run the risk of making it too different. If you make it too different, then people may not want to be interested at all. Maybe you can find a balance of both. I guess I don't know. So I guess I can say that it's really hard to do, folks. Of course. So this subject could have been spoken about in a discussion about a certain work, even if they're entirely superficial. Some people may go on to say that if you don't come up with an original idea, then don't bother trying to make the stories. Despite the fact that uh, even if you do get an original idea, an original story, it could often get ignored because of the lack of advertisement, or that it may not be as appealing to some people, or that they may not want to go ahead and go with this idea because maybe some individuals may not recognize for what it's worth. If not that, if it's too different, if it comes off too original, some people may be fearing that to actually make it go through with a set story idea. So even if you have a minority with two lesbian queens, well, I guess in this case, three queens if you watch the movies. So having three queens in the same story, it's like, what are you going to do there? That seems a way different compared to the other Disney princess type movies. Granted, if you're going to be really exact, it's going to be three queens and one king. Again, going off how the Frozen 2 had ended. So yeah, three queens and one king. I mean, assuming Elsa does the thing, returns to their own land, that is. But okay, how you gonna make that work out? How you gonna make that? How these characters run a country? So I don't know what the people will do there. That seems different compared to some of the other Disney films that they made in the past. That seems like a bit more original, sure, but would it be entertaining to some people? Will this have a mass market appeal? So my point is, like I was saying a moment ago, if you want to create something that comes off really, more original, something that's a bit more, way more different, while simultaneously having some sort of sense of familiarity to the previous two films, you may run the risk of losing the appeal of a lot of people because they're going to be not familiar with what you're doing here. So it's really a gamble. But that's the movie industry for you folks. The movie industry is about gambling in a sense because it's about competition. So when you get down to it, this is a capitalist country. It's all about, competition. So a lot of people may want to stick with what they already felt familiar with. I know when you think about it, that makes a lot of the audiences a bunch of hypocrites because considering the fact that a lot of people complain about sequels being, keep using the same story. A lot of people keep complaining about reboots. A lot of people keep complaining about remakes. A lot of people keep complaining even about the superheroes genre, like the DC movies or the Marvel movies, keep using the same formula of story all over and over and over again. But then these gonna say the same people who complain about the same plot being used over and over again are gonna complain about something being too different. So even if you want to have a balance between them two, then people can complain about that. People complain is too similar. Then people complain is too different. Even if you want to have a balance of the two, people will still complain about that anyway. So which is ridiculous. What I'm getting at is that's what they did with Star Wars, the Disney Star Wars films, where the fans complain about being a certain way. It just comes off like you can't please anybody, like at all. So you're still gonna run the risk of people complain about something no matter what. Not that I'm trying to be pessimistic or anything. I'm just trying to throw something out. Oh boy, I guess I should just go on with my leave it with my few final thoughts because this video has been going on for quite some time. So yeah, that's the thing, and I do appreciate anybody watching this. I know this is a really long video, of course, and I do appreciate anybody's watching. Do appreciate it. I really do appreciate anybody's watching this. So I know I haven't really given an exact answer per se, really. But whatever they're gonna do, I hope for the best, I guess. Again, like I said way earlier, it has not been confirmed that they're gonna actually do a third movie to begin with. I'm kind of wishy-washy on it because I don't. In one way, I don't mind it really, but like I was saying, if they keep going and going and going and going, they're gonna ultimately ruin it. Usually, not always. Usually, the downfall of a franchise usually happens at the third part. It's what I would call the third part curse. Is what I was referring to like way earlier in the video. Yeah, I just don't want Frozen to suffer the third part curse. If the if the third film in the franchise is garbage, chances are the fourth one will be, and the fifth one will be. I think the sixth or seventh or even eighth film would also be garbage. Even even if you could assume they may have actually given up at that point. I may even not go that far. I don't know. Only the future can tell, I guess. Only the future can tell. As always, thanks for watching, and take care. Till next time, see ya. Oh yeah.